Inside us is a maze of interdependent systems. Not one works alone. Blood gets oxygen from the lungs and fuel from the digestive system. In the bloodstream, the immune system is on constant patrol, hunting down germs and damaged cells. Our glands control dozens of activities: when we sleep and wake up, when we store food, and when we use it. The nervous system relays signals back and forth to the brain, the master of every move we make. At the heart of all this is the heart. We say the heart leaps, sinks, swells, aches, and breaks. What it really does is pump. The heart drives blood all over the body through a labyrinth of vessels. While the blood is getting pushed around, it drops off supplies for every cell. The deliveries include food and water, but the most critical cargo is oxygen. Blood soaks up oxygen in the lungs and enters the heart. The heart has 4 hollow chambers that work in pairs as 2 separate pumps. One pumps blood to the lungs to pick up oxygen, while the other pumps blood through the body to drop it off. The left side of the heart is in charge of getting blood to the body. The lower chamber, the left ventricle, is the heart's most powerful muscle. It propels blood out with enough pressure to travel through the entire body and back. This is no small feat. There are 60,000 miles of blood vessels, enough to go around the Earth 2.5 times. Blood leaves the heart through the body's largest artery, the aorta. It runs north, where the blood can take off toward the arms or brain, and then turn south to feed the middle and lower body. Arteries are more than just tubes. Built into their strong walls are muscles that control blood pressure and direct blood to where it's most needed. Large arteries branch into smaller tributaries called arterioles. They in turn lead to capillaries, where the blood drops off its vital supplies. Fuel and oxygen seep through to feed nearby cells. Blood has 3 main ingredients. Plasma is the liquid part of our blood. White cells are hunters. Their prey are germs and viruses. Red cells deliver food and oxygen. After trading oxygen for carbon dioxide, blood heads back toward the lungs and heart. Capillaries drain into small veins, which join up to form large vessels. Veins often lie next to arteries running the opposite direction. Every second, the 2 vessels carry the same amount of blood, but the veins are wider to make up for the loss of pressure and the flow against gravity. Just 40 seconds after leaving the heart, the blood is back. This time it enters the right side. The right ventricle pumps it on a short trip through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. If spread out, the surface area of the lungs would cover a tennis court. Lungs are a miracle of evolution, designed to put the maximum amount of oxygen into the blood. Although they fill 90% of the chest, the lungs weigh only 2.5 pounds. Millions of branching air passages make them light and spongy. Lung design is essential for our survival, since oxygen makes up only 1/5 of the air we breathe. When we breathe in, muscles between the ribs pull up the rib cage. A dome-shaped muscle below the lungs, the diaphragm, moves down. Each breath is forced down through a labyrinth of tubes inside the lungs. The air passages split over and over again, ending in miniature airbags called alveoli. The thin walls of these air sacs allow a quick exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen.
Digestion starts in the mouth. The teeth grind up the food. Next, special glands under the tongue pump out saliva. It helps break down the food. Saliva also lubricates the food on its 12-hour, 4-meter journey through the gut. It'll pass from the stomach into the small intestine and finally the large intestine. Waves of contracting muscle keep our food moving throughout the journey in a process called peristalsis. The contractions are so powerful, we can even eat upside down. This is a unique view of where the food is heading. For the first time, a new camera shows a high-definition view of the journey to our stomach. Food enters the stomach through a hole at the top. The stomach is a bag of muscle. It churns, squashes and squeezes the food into liquid. At the same time, acid breaks down the food. The acid is so corrosive, the stomach continually coats its interior walls with mucus for protection. Without it, stomach ulcers would form. After about an hour, the stomach squeezes the broken down food through a tiny hole called the pyloric sphincter. The food enters the small intestine, a 3.5-meter coil of tube. This is where we absorb most of the nutrients. First, the pancreas pumps out a juice that neutralizes the stomach acid. Then bile from the liver breaks down the fats into tiny droplets. Smaller droplets are easier for the intestine to absorb. The interior wall of the small intestine is lined with millions of microscopic projections called villi. These increase the surface area of the gut, making it easier to absorb nutrients. After an hour and a half, the small intestine has absorbed most of the nutrients from the food. What's left enters the large intestine through this, the ileocecal sphincter. It's a valve that prevents our food going back. There are few nutrients left to absorb now. The large intestine's main job is to extract water. What remains is a mixture of waste food, dead cells, and lots of bacteria. These bacteria in the large intestine aren't an infection. They produce enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates in our food. Carbohydrates we couldn't otherwise digest. Finally, after about 12 hours, we expel what remains of the meal.
When we burn fuel, blood carries the extra heat to the skin, where it's radiated. The human body has 656 muscles, each one made up of millions of tiny cells as thin as a hair and up to 2 inches long. Muscles are controlled by the nervous system, which sends electrical signals down the spinal cord and on through individual nerves. The nerve sends an electric shock to the cell's surface, and that makes tiny fibers inside the cell contract. When they do, the muscle shortens. A fraction of the cells in each muscle are used for light work. To increase the pull, the nervous system recruits more cells and fires more often. But muscles alone can't handle body movement. We'd be like jellyfish without bones to support us. The human skeleton has 206 separate bones, from 2 feet long to only a fraction of an inch. Each bone has been perfectly designed by evolution for a different purpose. The arms are supported by a bony framework across the shoulders, only loosely connected to the rest of the skeleton. Because our shoulder blades aren't attached to the rib cage, our arms have an enormous range of movement. The human hand is an amazing piece of bioengineering. The thumb facing the fingertips gives us a strong, sensitive grip. The fragile finger bones and joints are built for delicate work. Naturally, the bones with the most weight to support are the largest ones. These are the femurs, or thigh bones. Movable bones don't actually touch, but have a wear-resistant bearing between them, a joint. The knee is the most complex joint in the human body. The knee cap allows muscles to pull strongly around the joint when it bends.
With cutting-edge computer power. It's called Volumedic. And it shows how over 650 skeletal muscles make up to 1/3 of our adult body weight. Each hair grows from a hair follicle embedded in the skin. The modified cells grow here, then die as new cells push them upwards. We grow an incredible 11 kilometers of hair over our whole body every year. Our hair grows whether we want it to or not. However, other parts of our body
Each eye is a ball, an inch across that weighs 1/4 ounce. It's turned and rotated by 6 muscles. Light enters the eye through the cornea with a curved surface that provides most of the eye's focusing power. Behind the cornea is the most distinctive feature of any eye, the iris. Its involuntary muscles control how much light is let in by the pupil. The iris is named after the goddess of the rainbow. Colors and details vary from person to person. It's a mark of identity. No two people have the same pattern of lines and flecks. Behind the iris is the lens. Seen from inside the eye, looking out, it hangs by fibers like the spokes of a wheel. The lens is surrounded by a ring of muscle that can squeeze and alter its shape. It fine-tunes focus by compensating for distance. The lens must become more curved to clearly focus on nearby objects. Just as a glass of liquid bends light, when we look at an object, the light bends at the front of the eye to a focus on the retina. The retina receives the image upside down. It's up to the brain to turn it right side up. The retina is a thin layer of cells lining the back of the eyeball. It's actually part of the nervous system, connected to the brain by the optic nerve. The specialized cells of the retina soak up light and turn what we see into a stream of electrical signals. There are 2 types of light receptors. Most are long, thin rod cells, which see well in dim light, but only in black and white. Cones are stubby, pointed cells that detect color, but work best in bright light.
we're bombarded with hundreds of strange new sounds. Sound waves make the eardrum vibrate. On the other side of the eardrum, these tiny bones, the ossicles, vibrate in sympathy. They're the smallest 3 bones in our body. They are so small, they could fit on a fingertip. Nor do they get any bigger. They stay this size all our life. But without them, we would never hear a thing. The ossicles are the ear's amplifiers. They amplify the volume 22 times. The amplified vibrations enter the inner ear, the cochlea. It's lined with delicate hairs. When vibrations pass through, the hairs vibrate. At the top, low-frequency hairs. At the base, fragile hairs for high-frequency sounds. Each one 200 times thinner than a hair on our head. Over time, loud noises will damage these hairs. But at this age, they are perfect.
The air we breathe is filled with molecules carrying aroma. The nose figures out what shape these molecules are, and that's how we smell. Different shapes are perceived as different scents. Most of the sniff of air ends up in the lungs, but 5% of it goes to the top of the nose. The vapor flows through a jungle of nasal passages until it hits the roof, a region packed with nerve endings. smell molecules dissolve in mucus and are trapped by hairy receptors. The olfactory nerves that pick up smell are virtually an extension of the brain. When a smell cell grabs a molecule, it shoots an electronic signal through a thin layer of bone straight into the brain. No other sense is so immediate. And, unique among brain cells, the olfactory nerves renew themselves. You get a whole new nose every 3 to 4 weeks. The left side of the body is connected to the brain's right hemisphere, and sensations from the right side of the body end up in the left. Each part of the cortex is responsible for a different part of the body. Speech, emotion, and skilled movements are generated in the frontal lobe. The motor cortex handles body movement. The part of the brain that senses touch is here. Because different areas of the skin are more sensitive than others, this is what the body looks like to the brain. There are far more nerves in the hands alone than in the entire back. Tongue, lips, and fingers stand out as the most sensitive skin regions.
A cut knee is part of childhood. As soon as the skin is broken, the body's repair mechanism swings into action. Blood capillaries constrict to reduce their diameter and slow the bleeding. Next, platelets, a type of blood cell, make the blood in the cut become viscous and clot. Eventually, the clot forms a plug that stops blood leaking out. Our cells multiply at a prolific rate, not only to increase the number of cells in the body, but also to replace worn-out tissue with newer, stronger, bigger versions. It's the same process of cell growth that heals wounds. In fact, we're so good at healing in our youth, even the scar disappears.
The reproductive glands produce estrogen and testosterone, which control the development of breasts, body hair, and sex glands during puberty. That's when women begin to menstruate, when, once a month, an egg is released from an ovary. In men, puberty triggers the production of sperm. The testes are filled with hundreds of yards of tubes where sperm originate. Packed around the walls are the germ cells which will develop into sperm. The massive tails are mature sperm waiting to be called into action. The sperm is a highly efficient machine for delivering its packet of genes to the target. The torpedo head has a cap of chemicals that will bore into the female egg. Inside is a dense mass of DNA. Unwind the DNA, and in its double helix is the genetic code. It's packaged into bundles, chromosomes, that are carried by both sperm and egg. Once a month, the pituitary gland releases a hormone that stimulates a female egg. Next to the uterus is an ovary, where eggs wait for the hormone signal to trigger one to escape into the fallopian tube. The stage is set for the creation of a new human being. During intercourse, sperm are propelled into the prostate gland and fortified by special secretions. At ejaculation, they perform a spectacular feat, swimming the equivalent of 5 miles. Splashed against the woman's cervix is a flood of 400 million sperm, most of which fall by the wayside. This is where most sperm die. This sperm's eye view of the vagina reveals the microscopic nooks and crannies that trap sperm. The vagina also contains acid that protects it from bacteria. Germs won't flourish here, and neither will sperm. 100 million are killed instantly. The fallopian tubes are lined with microscopic hairs which sweep the egg onwards. Unlike the wiggling sperm, it can't move on its own. The egg has less than 48 hours to meet up with the sperm. Only during this time can a woman become pregnant. For the surviving sperm, the next obstacle on this course is the cervix, the narrow door to the womb. It can be blocked by a plug of mucus. This sticky barrier protects the woman by preventing harmful bacteria from invading the vulnerable womb. Under a microscope, the mucus appears impassable, but for 2 days every month, the structure changes to a wider mesh, and the strongest sperm can force their way through. The mucus cleans off any bacteria they may carry. Less than 1% of the sperm reach the final hurdle, the entrance to the fallopian tubes. Only one tube carries the egg, so half go the wrong way. Out of the 400 million that began the trip, only 100 sperm reached the egg. Once there, they frantically try to bore their way in through the outer shell. In this race, winner takes all. Only one sperm can penetrate the egg. The winner binds to the egg's surface. An explosive charge of enzymes in its head drills through the shell. A wave of color marks the moment, a chemical signal sweeping across the egg. With lightning speed, the shell of the egg hardens to prevent other sperm from entering. Within hours of fertilization, the 2 sets of chromosomes from egg and sperm reach out to each other and combine. This signals the egg to begin dividing. Chromosomes pull apart and the egg splits into 2 cells. After a few hours, each splits again. During the week it takes to travel down the fallopian tube, these cells continue to divide and multiply. The process begins slowly and then speeds up. In order for pregnancy to occur, the fertilized egg must implant in the uterus. The odds are 50-50 that the cell could be lost with the woman's next menstrual period. But if by day 7 the embryo is burrowing into its mother's womb, a new life begins. From the simple beginning of division and multiplication, identical cells begin to change. Genes carry messages that instruct cells to differentiate. By the 5th week of pregnancy, the fertilized egg has become an embryo and is visible to the human eye. The embryo has a head and trunk and the beginnings of a brain. There's a digestive system, kidneys, and a liver, and buds which will become arms and legs. This small miracle is the size of a coffee bean. By the 8th week, all the main internal organs are there, though they have yet to fully develop. The limb buds start to look like tiny arms and legs. The embryo may begin to kick, but the mother can't feel it. It's still smaller than her little toe. After another month has passed, the embryo has become a fetus, and it's kicking, curling toes, clenching fists, frowning, and making other facial expressions. The mother still can't feel it. The fetus is only about 2.5 inches long. By the 13th week, the baby is completely formed. By week 32, the fetus lacks only a good layer of insulating fat, and lung tissue has not completely matured. During the final 8 weeks, the baby's appearance changes little, but the cells in the brain and nervous system continue to knit together, and the baby becomes more alert.
It's the most important breath of our life, the first of 700 million. Rushes down the trachea, through thousands of branching tubes, into nearly 30 million tiny air sacs, the alveoli. These absorb oxygen into our blood. And draw out the carbon dioxide we exhale with every breath.